All right, welcome everybody to episode 61 of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. I am Anthony Ewing, one of your hosts for the Navigating Now roundtable series. We've had a handful of guest hosts, teammates, community members step in and lead the conversation, which I'm extremely thrilled about. But today I'm going to be selfish. We've got an incredible guest at the table, a newfound friend of the Thought Team community and the Navigating Now community, and we'll introduce her in just a moment. But just to cover off on some housekeeping items, we want to welcome everybody from all of our live communities. We go live every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Central. We particularly want to welcome our LinkedIn family. We love the LinkedIn community that we're building and a part of. Those communities that are small, those learning professionals that tune in to get nuggets from day to day, and also those leaders and entrepreneurs that just want to learn more about, what others are doing out in the marketplace. So thank you all, those folks that stop by in the feed or those folks who have tuned in from our LinkedIn community. ThoughtTeam.com/live is where you can find all previous episodes as well as all future episodes. And today we have a special one. So I want to introduce Michaela Parlett here in just a second. She goes by the name of Michaela Belle. And Michaela is a leader. She's an organizer of community. She is a learning designer and learning practitioner. And we are just so thrilled to have her sharing a little bit on the messy middle of entrepreneurship. So Michaela, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
this is so exciting.
It is, yeah. And anytime we can bring new guests to the table like yourself who offer so much more than what we know in our own swim lanes. For us, that's management consulting, but we pull from so many different industries, particularly those that are out there building community and leading small groups of people in unique ways. And I think that's a little bit of the practitionership that I want to unpack with you today. And I know that folks will get a lot out of that conversation. But I always want to start by bringing it back. And Michaela, you and I have had a chance to connect just on a human level, first and foremost. And we've got a great story to share about that. Mm-hmm. But we always like to tap into, folks' nostalgic sense of who they were back in the day and how that's connected to who they are today. So Michaela, as you think back, you wear a lot of hats today. You're a leader, you're an entrepreneur, you're a manager of community. When you were a child, was there a moment or an experience that you had where you maybe thought at the time, ooh, this is something I want to do when I grow up?
Yeah, so we had briefly talked about this like a little bit on my podcast when I
Yep.
had you on. Was that last week?
It was last week, yeah. Okay. Early last week.
Mm-hmm. And I really had to think about it. But one of my friends, she always says that my profession is being a cultivator of safe spaces, and which I love that. But the first time that I can remember that happening just like super organically was when I was a very, very young girl. I was a young gymnast. And I walked into the locker room one day, and one of the other elite gymnasts, who was significantly older than me, there was almost like I could sense in the room like a heaviness on her heart. And again, I was so young, but I could sense it. And I just walked right up to her and I said, "Are you okay?" And this is a woman who, she is like, I know she went to the Olympic trials. She was a insane gymnast, super stoic, right? Really strong, never showed any emotion. And she just broke down in front of me and shared some like personal stuff about what was going on like in her heart and in her soul. And that was really one of the first times where I remember being like, I just want to help people and create safe spaces for people to be real and raw, because it's not healthy for us to hold that stuff in. So I think that was the very first memory for me of that. And granted, I like you mentioned, I wear a lot of hats and that's like one piece of the puzzle for me, but I just love creating those spaces for people,
Yeah.
because I think we need more of that
Hmm.
in our lives.
It's interesting. We are always, especially this day and age, we're taught to think back to our childhood and uncover those moments of trauma or
Mm,
of difficulty and take care of those moments. But how often
yeah.
are we called to think back to those moments where even if you didn't identify or know that you had the capability, you created safe space for somebody else and like exploit
Yeah.
that?
That's such a good point. That that challenged me right there. Even
Yeah.
just that thought, because I
Yeah.
do take people back, like when I'm coaching or a lot of the
Hmm.
content that I have, we do look back a little bit.
Hmm.
But that's a really good point. I like
It
that.
could be an interesting exercise, right? If you're working
Yeah.
with a group of folks. I mean, again, retrospectively, we were taught to care for those moments, those times, those events that we didn't have the ability to.
Mm,
But I think a great brainstorming exercise would be to think back at a time where you didn't know it, but you were expressing an inherent skill that you had that ultimately would become your superpower. And
yeah.
for me, that is creating great experiences for folks. And when I think back to my childhood, I always refer to my ability to bring my buddies together in unique ways. And the backyard football games were not just a couple of cones. I mean, the stage was set. I mean,
Hmm.
we had people watching, and there were snacks at halftime, and it was an experience, right?
Yeah.
um, and I spent a lot of time in my childhood thinking about how I could bring experiences to my friends, whether that's on a
Mm,
one-on-one basis, or a group of guys just in the backyard throwing the football around. And
yeah.
again, at the time, I didn't know it. I just knew I had this desire to organize and to
Yeah.
create great experiences for people. And I was drawing off of my mother's ability to do it,
Hmm.
and seeing just the impact in people's eyes light up when she
Yeah.
created a great environment. And it sounds like you maybe had some of the same influences as a child as well.
Yeah. My mom is somebody that whenever we'd be going grocery shopping or really anywhere, she always said to me, Michaela, if you think of a compliment in your head, tell the person.
Mm,
So even my dad tells this one story when I think I was 5, where we were at the grocery store, and I'm a whole 5 foot nothing. And I've always just been a really tiny, petite little girl. And so I was I was 5, and we were checking out at the grocery store. And I said to the man checking us out, I said, "That tie looks really nice on you, sir." And my dad just kind of like looked down at me. But he said that guy's
that's
face lit up,
incredible. Yep.
right? And so I think that, yeah, when I watch my mom walk through a room, she's really
Mm,
great at noticing everybody around her.
mm,
So I definitely for sure got that from her. But what a cool team exercise
mhm.
to ask kind of that question of what you just asked me. It would be
Yeah.
so interesting as a team to
Yeah.
hear other people's stories. And people want to be needed and known.
Hmm.
And that would be like part of the known puzzle.
Interesting. Yeah. And we have to make those connections.
Yeah.
We have to make those connections. And I think it's important. One of the things I'm most excited about in the work that we're doing within corporate America is that these types of conversations are being more and more welcomed,
Yeah.
into the general conversation. So, for example, we run workshops with small teams of leaders, and they're developing a 3 to 5 year strategic plan.
Hmm.
Now we're able to infuse a layer of dialogue underneath them developing and creating the future together as a team that allows them to bring forward aspects of them that make them great
Hmm.
leaders, and
Hmm.
even double clicks into like, where did that come from, talking a little bit about your values, talking a little bit about your past experiences, and even your personal life, and sometimes your childhood.
Yeah.
And I think that has been one of the greatest gifts that has come from the last few years of just complete unraveling.
Yeah.
These conversations have made their way into the 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 staunchiest corners of you know the global headquarters,
Yes.
and we can't ignore it anymore. And so we're just having so much fun. And it could be as simple as an icebreaker question at the beginning of a meeting.
Yep.
That just gets people opening up about who they are and where they came from. And the work then that you do, whether it's completely outside of personal development, even if it's operational and tactical in nature, that work just becomes better.
Yeah.
And we've been having so much fun with our corporate clients, bringing these conversations to the forefront of our work and theirs, which has been exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, and laughter is such an important piece of vulnerability that I think we often forget about. You know, because nobody wants to be sad all the time or dig up like all the stuff. And when you can infuse laughter, it's like such an icebreaker in general, and it just changes the mood of everything. Actually, in all of the products that I've created, I'm a big believer in all things video. It's like a heart passion of mine. My previous career was I was the general manager of a video production and content creation company. So I love video. And so in all of my video courses, I told the editor, leave in my mistakes and actually make light of them. Like turn my head upside down, zoom in on, like make it funny. And so I will tell you that like my students, they post on our Facebook group or in the actual course all the time of like, oh my gosh, thank you for leaving these moments in. They made me smile. They made me laugh. And those are the things that people often remember, because, you know, we really connect. People are impressed with our strengths, but they connect to us in our weaknesses. And I think as leaders, sometimes we're afraid to show our quote unquote weaknesses or imperfections.
Yep.
But that's how people connect to you, because that's just real.
I love that. I'm reminded of I think it was this morning's Instagram post, which I screenshotted and saved because I thought it was just so compelling. And you said, you're always going to face a battle over something you were called to be a solution for. And I think that example of that the humility in, you know, don't edit it out is almost an opportunity for you to uncover, you know, a battle that you're facing that ultimately then can allow you to empower other people. So you're demonstrating, you know, of that humility, and that kind of like raw nature empowers other people, which I know is at the heart of everything that you do, which I want to get into in a second. But I also want to acknowledge why you and I are here today. And, you know, it is all about community.
Yes.
You know, 70 plus weeks ago, we started this Navigating Now platform as a way to bring thought leadership to our community. What we didn't realize is that it was going to evolve into a living, breathing community itself. And what started as a cohort of great leaders, you know, providing perspective out to our community, now is this incredible ecosystem of leaders that are connected through unique ways. And you and I are a perfect example of this. So let's do another exercise. Before we tell the story of how you and I met, I want you to describe our meeting point, right? There was an event that you and I attended, in just words. Like, what were the words that came to the top of your mind in the event that you and I attended just about a month ago? A couple of words.
About the event in general, or just our
event in general?
The event in general. Empowering, enlightening, community driven, family, love. Yeah.
Those are all such good words. You took the word that I wanted to use that I was certain you weren't going to use, but it was like number one for me, which is family. It's family. So I'll bring everybody into Michaela and I's connection point, how we met. Just about a month ago, a mutual friend of ours a community leader herself, and also a member of the Navigating Now community, Christina Glickman, who I know most folks that are part of this community know her because they've either seen the episode, they've seen a lot of her content, or they even saw her at our most recent 5-year anniversary party, and she just lights up a room.
She does.
And she was just outside of Philadelphia giving her first TEDx talk. And much like everything else she does, she so beautifully brought everybody into this experience of her designing, developing, practicing for this talk in a way that was not mechanical and operational, but just absolutely open and raw.
Yeah.
And it was almost like every morning I couldn't, the first thing I did when I woke up was look for her Instagram stories, because I wanted to make sure that she was practicing at 4:30 in the morning. And I wanted to see, how her family was supporting her in so many unique ways along the journey. So much so that I fell in love with this, the way she was going about the process. And I was so inspired by it that I decided to, at kind of the last second, drop everything and fly out to Philadelphia to attend this TEDx talk live. And it was at a point for me where I needed to step away from work. I was crossing the point of exhaustion and entering the space of depletion from a really long summer. And I knew that I needed to just kind of break a little bit of my pattern, my day-to-day pattern. So I took a couple days off. I booked a flight. I flew to Philadelphia, and it was probably one of the most remarkable experiences of my year. And I guess, Michaela, maybe for some very similar reasons, like you decided to, quote, show up as well. And I want to hear your kind of rationale, or like the build up to you attending Christina's talk, because I think you and I have very similar, stories.
Yes. Yeah. So Christina and I met in a group coaching community. And if you've ever seen her, like you had mentioned, there's something about Christina that just radiates from within. Like she's just pure sunshine from her external appearance, but honestly, you just feel her soul. And so her and I connected immediately. I think I even sent her a message, like in Zoom, a direct message to her. And I'm like, I think I love you.
Yep.
And so her and I have developed a beautiful friendship. And when she first told me she was doing TEDx, I assumed it was going to be in Chicago. That was just like my assumption. So I had been planning on flying there to surprise her. And then she let everybody know where it was. And it was literally a town over from where I live.
Yep.
Crazy. So I was like, okay, cool. Yes. There she is. And I mean, look at that outfit.
I mean, again, just radiates great energy, and backs it up as well too with her soul, really. I mean, she's just in the embodiment of positive energy.
Yes, exactly. I mean, how can you not show up to support this woman? But my whole thing is, I think it's so important to show up for people.
Yep.
And for me lately, in just the world that we've been living in, I've been trying to physically show up for my friends, because we've really been lacking that as of late. And even the other week, my church was finally back together, and I watched people come together and just tears, because that physical connection is so important. And so that's really why I wanted to show up for Christina, because I love her and I care for her, and I just believe in showing up for people.
Yeah, I love that. And you and I talked about the premium that physically showing up for somebody has today more than it ever has before. And I think, for me, my heart was just saying I needed to physically be there. And it was so interesting because, yes, there were some selfish reasons of just wanting to kind of step away from the day-to-day to be inspired, because I knew that her talk and that experience would be really inspiring. TEDx is a smaller venue. So, there was maybe 40, 50 people there. I might be miscounting, but anywhere between 50 and 100 people, right? And I think due to restrictions, they had to keep it really small, which made this unbelievably intimate setting and an absolutely beautiful setting. You can see here, I mean, it was outside. It was up against this beautiful old kind of rail yard. So yes, I wanted to be inspired. I wanted to be immersed in her talk because I had followed this journey. The single word that I would use for my experience there was family.
Yeah.
And what was the surprise for me was that barely knowing Christina, really through Instagram and a couple of like discussions over DM, I almost felt like I was a part of her family because I had physically showed up.
Yes.
And as well, I got to experience the way that she interacted with her family, which was such a gift for me. The way that her family just surrounded her with support.
Yeah.
And, you know, she has these beautiful children that are just taking care of each other while paying attention to mom. She has a husband who is, you know, running around taking photos and capturing every second of it. And you could just tell that she had this beautiful army family of support that really enabled and empowered her to do so well on that stage, which we can all imagine how nerve-wracking, you know, giving a TED talk, let alone, you know, practicing for a 10-minute talk for 6 months can be.
Yeah.
And so it was just, there were so many lessons, you know, that were reinforced, not necessarily learned, but reinforced. The power and the importance of showing up.
Yep.
The ability to pour yourself into or to support people almost blindly without context, I think is also an interesting lesson. And then as well, just the absolute beauty in family, and how family can enable careers in ways that maybe I never knew existed, right? And so it was such a great experience.
Yeah. It sounds to me like just having that exposure, because once you're exposed to something, you can't be unexposed.
Yep.
So I always try to, even in life, experience new things, try new things, go new places, because you never know what new lesson you're going to get. So even anybody that's watching this live or later, maybe what's one way that you can show up either for people in your personal life or the people that you lead, like how can you show up for them in new ways? Because that people feel that.
100%. Yeah, they feel it. And I also love the term that you use, exposure, too. How can you expose yourself, you know, to those elements that empower you and enable you and encourage you to step into like who you really are? And for me, again, showing up is a bit of that practice. It's a bit of that exposure that I need to remind myself that, you know, as a kid, that's all I really wanted was to show up and to have my friends show up kind of physically and have these great experiences. And I was able to do that now as an adult. I think the other thing we've been talking a lot about with community, and maybe this is a good segue into your work, Michaela, is that we're realizing both in our consulting work and also as we're navigating now this community outside of our day-to-day work. You know, it's interesting. You start a business and you have these grand plans to scale it and make something huge that lives well beyond who you are today. If you do really good work as a small business, you realize that you could spend the next 30 years pouring into this small group of people around you, and you could be 10x more fulfilled, and you could be busier than all get up. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned over the last couple years is through the power of community is just how much we should be and could be pouring into our communities in ways that we would oversee with such a lens of like scalability and growth. So it's interesting how like that scalability and growth discussion, yes, it's a part of like how we plan as a business, but it's not a part of our community discussions. So you know, that's been another big lesson. And I want that to segue a little bit into the type of work that you do today. So you obviously you have a background, you know, working for a larger agency. You've had exposure to, you know, larger groups of people, different technology platforms, et cetera. And you've decided to create a little bit of a platform of your own. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about, you know, what you do and the communities that you're building.
Yeah. So my journey, has been interesting, especially at the beginning of COVID. So I was a general manager of the video production company. And like you said, I got exposed to a lot of things there. I kind of fell into that job, to be honest with you. I was in a network marketing company for 12 years, did very well there, but I was like done. I think that I learned the lessons I was supposed to learn there, but I was ready to move on. And I didn't know what was next. And so my friend, we also did music together. He's like, well, I'll hire you. I was like, okay. So I kind of like fell into that. And then at the beginning of March 2020, he let a lot of us go. And so I was really stuck with trying to figure out what to do. And I, at that time, was writing a book, which was really all about how to embrace singleness and use that season of your life to shift your focus from being obsessed to finding a partner to really being obsessed with finding you and growing in your own personal development, emotional development, spiritual development, all those things. So I took the outline of the book and I decided to create an online course. And that since then I've created multiple courses. I've written a couple different journals. I started a podcast and I've just been like creating. And that was when I really realized how much I love creating experiences for people and designing experiences from the minute that somebody signs up for a course of mine, what gets sent to them in the mail, to the workbook development, to the aesthetics of everything, all of that. Like I just care about all of it. And so now I'm starting to get into a little bit of consulting to help other people design better experiences for their clients.
That's incredible. I want to maybe get just a little bit nerdy because I think you're touching on a few things that, you know, we have we as learning practitioners have a community of other, you know, trainers, coaches, leaders, speakers, and a handful of which are designing these learning experiences for organizations or out on their own. I want to maybe just dig into a little bit of like the aspects of a great learning experience because I've seen a little bit of your work product and we've talked a little bit about it. And I think your stuff is a little differentiated. And there are a couple of things that I know you believe in that might be a little bit more traditional that have really high impact. For example, the workbook. You know, we have discussions all the time about whether this workshop, whether this series, whether this meeting needs a workbook or a field guide or something to go along with it. One of the things that we have found, especially in the virtual space, is that it's not only required, but that type of supplemental information is a necessity when you're sitting behind a Zoom screen trying to connect with other humans. So tell us about your workbook, because I also know it's like super beautiful. I don't know if you've got one next to you.
Yeah, I do.
And I want to know, like, you know, what's kind of what role does it play in your learning experience? Maybe tell us a little about your learning experience. What role does that workbook play in your learning experience?
Yeah, so one of the things I really care about is implementation of knowledge. You know, Jim Quick always says this, that knowledge is at best potential power, but implementation of knowledge, that's really where change and transformation happens. And so for me, creating beautiful videos and, you know, having them fun and engaging and all of that is great, but people can access knowledge and content everywhere. Yep. So my thing with creating the workbook was, how can I help people take the knowledge, but then actually implement it? And there's a lot of research too about the power of writing, like physically writing. And I know we do a lot of things, like everything is on our phones, but for me and like my brain, I have to write something down in order to actually remember it. That's why I have a Remarkable. Have you ever heard of Remarkable?
Oh, that's yes. A tool's awesome. I don't have one, but yes, I know exactly what it is.
I'm obsessed. So it's like still technology, but I get to write it
But it's
down.
like paper. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so especially with the work that I do in my courses it's a lot. I mean, I ask the women to get pretty vulnerable with what they're going through. And I think personal growth takes a requirement is vulnerability. And so a lot of the exercises that I would tell them to do, I thought, why not create a workbook that's aesthetically pleasing? Because one of the things, even my nutritionist the other week was like, Michaela, you need to drink more water. She goes, get a pretty water bottle. Because you're going to want to drink out of it more.
Yeah.
It matters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you have to think about your client and everything, but something that is aesthetically pleasing that makes them want to go to it was also, so it was like all these different things, all the different reasons why I thought I really want to have a workbook and I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be something they want to open up and use. Yep. And I want it to be a tool for their implementation.
Yeah, and you know, we are not having, and I'll translate this into corporate learning and development or commercial learning and development. We are not having the follow-up hallway discussions after training workshops or leadership development series that we typically would, where some of that synthesizing and distillation actually happens, and even the connecting of content. What did you think about that concept? How would you implement it, et cetera? Yeah. We're literally joining trainings, you know, for 60 minutes. And the second it runs over, we're closing Zoom down and we're moving on to our next piece. And so we have found that some of the more analog materials, whether it be a workbook, a journal, or just, you know, handwritten reflection exercises, almost challenges people to sit and do some of that synthesizing that they would do verbally with their colleagues in side meetings or hallway discussions, which I think is also really important. I also want to talk about, you mentioned for you're a very video-centric offering. You have video-centric offerings. Tell us about like production quality of content these days. Like, is there still a real importance on production quality? Is there a balance between the highly produced training and development content and just people wanting to see, you know, you at 8:30 in the morning without makeup on talking about the real?
That's a great question. So, I mean, the beauty of the technology that we have, honestly, the cameras on these things are so good these days. But for me personally, I see such a high value on the production level quality of things, the quality of everything, and even down to the editing. So when somebody first signs up for one of my courses or products, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times it is all the time, almost every single person, that the first thing they watch, they're like, oh, dang, she didn't mess around. So, and I think part of that is when you have quality things, there's almost like a sense of, oh, wow, she really values me. She really values what she's doing. And she cares so much that it's in the details.
Yeah. You know, and we've been paying also attention to just kind of general trends. So if, you know, 2 years ago or 18 months, whatever it was at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was kind of flipping virtual, it was, you were differentiated if you turned on the live button and you were able to just go to market with your message and you didn't have to wait for like the long post-production times and the turnaround. What's happened in the last 18 months in our space is that there's now so much of that low fidelity, like raw content out there. Everybody's going live, everybody has a message, you know, and so it's almost like the pendulum is swinging the other direction where if you have more of a premium training course or piece of content, it's going to cut through maybe some of just the humming or the noise of content that are out there. We're also finding that, you know, organizing our participants in unique ways and recreating again some of this connection that would typically happen at a 3 or 5 day conference is also a big differentiator. I'm curious, Michaela, outside of the workbook, which is we're a huge fan of. We love field guides and workbooks. And that's because we like the analog aspect of learning and development, and that doesn't go away whether you're behind a camera or in a classroom. It sounds like video is also a key for you. What are some of the other maybe differentiators as you think about, designing one of your courses like Own Your Now, or some of the small groups that you run?
I think definitely the community aspect
Yeah.
is super important. So pretty much everything that I do, there's some type of community element to it, because I think that there's something really powerful about collective growth, where you're not the only one growing. And I also believe in collective wisdom. One of the things I tell my students all the time is, what do you think about that? Because there's so much brilliance in a room. There's so much brilliance on your team that we probably don't even know about yet because we haven't really asked. And so I think that collective growth and that collective wisdom is wildly underused and so important. So I think for me, it's just like bringing people together, even if it is on Zoom. I think that there's ways that you can still create that safe place and that environment.
Yeah. Tell us about, one of your courses or your small groups or one of your progressions that you've designed, and what are some of the things that you want to see people come out with? Like, are there things that you want them to say, or are there things you're looking for, or that you want to hear as folks go through your experience or leave your experience? Like, I don't want to be as basic as how are you measuring the success of your offerings, but more so like, what are some of those cool like indicators that like, oh yeah, this is working?
Yeah. So great question. I think for me, it is when somebody says, I've taken a lot of online courses before, but this one felt different. And I changed significantly more than I thought that I was going to, because personal growth right now is, a lot of people are talking about it, right? But I think when you bring in some of the elements like the workbook and the implementation pieces and the community aspect, the relationships that I've seen my students develop with one another, like when I see them getting together on Instagram, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And that's exactly what I wanted to see. I didn't want it to just be about, oh yes, they had success, but oh wow, not only did they grow, but so did their friendships.
I love that. I couldn't agree with you more in that when you have people continuing to organize around the concepts or the content well after your last workshop or your last touch point or your last one-on-one, that is a huge indicator. And you like the verbal feedback of like, this was really impactful and we're really changing things. But when you start to see people continue the dialogue, or when you start to see it show up in their lives or their work, that's just the good stuff. That's, as learning designers, that's what we absolutely live for. So I commend you for paying attention to not just paying attention to, but being so passionate about these elements. And I appreciate you geeking out a little bit, because we love having designers on the show, and I love just asking some of the really specific questions that I know there's a handful of people that are geeking out about out there in our community.
Yeah, I love it. I love all things. I love all things design. I'll just really quickly show you. This is like one of, when somebody joins a course of mine, they get a box. Even the tape is
that branded tape?
It is. It's branded.
Of course. Tape. Okay.
I know. Okay. It's ridiculous.
But and that's cool. That sets the expectation. Look at that.
The box is branded, and I have like a bunch of stuff under. There's stickers, and I maybe went slightly overboard, but everybody posts pictures of it, and I get so many comments and DMs of like, wow, this made me feel so special. And same thing with the
Look at
workbook.
that workbook.
I know. It's a
Are you
little,
kidding?
I know
That's
it's a lot.
incredible. There's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do. And I have letters in there like from me and just tons of
Journal
activities,
prompts and things.
journals.
Yep.
Yep. Lots of, there's like 4 journal pages for every week. And this is a
Okay.
10-week, this specific one is a 10-week course. But yeah, I just think to care about the details and because people feel in every piece of that part of you.
100%, especially when it comes to like personal development and growth. I mean, you want to feel connected. You want to feel good. You want to feel like you're stepping into more than just a sage on stage, more than just somebody who's going to talk at you, right? That there's things to do. There's prompts, there's nudges. To your point, there's implementation, which I love that. I love that term. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about, your practitionership. We love the word practitionership. It's hard to say, but we absolutely love the word. We define it as the work that you exist to do. It's almost like, the old sculptors and painters that were just so focused and passionate about a single piece that they would spend like their entire life because it was absolutely what they loved to do.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced I was one of those in a previous life. Like I'm convinced I worked on like a single block of granite for my entire life because I just love that level of like focus and that attention to detail. And I could see some of that come through in your work. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. It's so fun.
Yes, there is like at this point in the show, I should have another 30 minutes with you, but clearly we went so deep on like the first few topics. 2 of which doesn't surprise me. We both love Christina Glickman, her community, and supporting her in ways that she's been able to support us from afar. Secondly, we touched a little bit on your practitionership, your ability to organize people and design experiences for them, which it's just thrilled to hear a little bit about your craft. As you think up and out and you look at the growth and the evolution of your brand and your offerings, what are some of the things you're most excited about?
I am excited about growing exactly what I have now and continuing to get really good at what I do. So I don't know if anybody knows anything about Enneagram or personality tests, but I'm an Enneagram 7, which they tend to like bop around a lot. And one of the things that I'm trying to get a little bit better at is get really good at this one thing, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so I'm trying to pace myself and learn how to rest and to really enjoy what I have created. So in that, I'm starting to speak significantly more. And I think I am going to get back to finishing the book
Cool.
that I have started. So yeah, lots of speaking things that are coming up, diving a little bit more into consulting for other companies and the book.
What are some of the tools, resources, Instagram pages that you're tapping into for motivation?
For motivation.
Or inspiration, I should say.
That's a good question. I've actually been trying to be on Instagram less and less. I think a lot of speakers that I follow are like some of my favorite pastors. So I don't know if that's your jam or not, but my spiritual mentor is probably one of the best communicators of like right now ever. I mean, I have never met somebody who is a better communicator than his name is Dr. Darius Daniels. And he's just exceptional at his craft. And so I love watching him. And now he's diving into courses and speaking more. He's going on tour with Tony Robbins. So like, no big deal, So him and like Travis Green. One of my favorite authors is Anne Lamott. Do you know who that is?
I don't. I probably should.
She has a book called Bird by Bird.
Okay.
And it's specifically written for aspiring authors, but it's really about life.
Mm.
So she tells this one story about her brother who was overwhelmed with this project that he had to write about. It was this bird, something for his English class.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to write about all these birds. And he left it to the last minute to do, which a lot of us do that, right?
Yeah.
And his dad said to him, you just got to focus one, bird by bird. Just look at the one bird, write about that bird. That's the only thing that you focus on. And then when you're done, focus on the next bird. And that whole book is, I just finished it and it was absolutely phenomenal. So
Okay.
highly recommend.
And inspiring you to get back into the writing game, it sounds like.
Even just in general, like life because I think so many of us, especially as entrepreneurs and people who are driven leaders, we're always looking at, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? What can we do next? And I think sometimes it's learning about how to embrace the right now and really how to live in it. Because if you're always worried about what's next, you're never going to really enjoy right now. And so I think until you value where you are right now, you won't be invited to your next, like the next best thing. So that book kind of has helped me just bring me back to, let's enjoy the process. Even, I don't know, rest, which is now one of the things that I am really pushing into.
Focused on.
I'm super focused on rest right now. Because I've been experiencing some burnout after some of the Own Your Now. It was like, I just was going and I immediately went into launching it. And I was like, I really should have given myself a little bit more rest. So that book has kind of brought me back to just bird by bird.
I love it.
One thing at a time.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, and I'll maybe close off with this. One of the things that, I have found to be such a common thread that's pulled through everybody that's been on the show, those folks who are entrepreneurs, or many of the folks that step on that have entrepreneurial tendencies and mindsets, like one of the common threads is the true appreciation for the process.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting how many of us, when we get away from the process, when we've got to focus on the big issue or even like a massive opportunity, sometimes we get really restless or really uncomfortable because we're so rooted in the process. Yeah. And whenever I feel like I'm getting away from the process, it's a real indicator of like, you need to step back and understand are you chasing the big thing, the new shiny thing? Are you fixating on an issue that you shouldn't be? And maybe you just need to step back into the process, bird by bird, as you say it. And I first and foremost just want to thank you for joining today, Michaela. So often we find ourselves connecting with just like-minded individuals. And when Christina put you and I in touch, I just knew like there was going to be a connection. And several folks on our team have already commented about just how incredible your energy has been and how easy it's been to kind of follow you and a bit of what you're putting out there. So I want to let you know, what you're putting out there, the story you're telling, the community that you're building, it really matters. And we've been drafting off of it for a couple of weeks. We've been so excited to be a part of your community. I was so pumped to be on your show. And we're so thrilled to have you on ours. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, and just for being so warm and welcoming, and your whole team. Like attracts like. And so I just want to affirm you in that the team that you're building is incredible, but a lot of that is because you are as an individual. So
I appreciate that.
Thank
I really
you for
appreciate
letting
that.
me be a part of this today.
Yes. So how do people find you if they want to follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm mostly on Instagram at Michaela Belle, and it's like Michael with an A and then Belle. I love being actually social on social media. So send me a voice DM.
Yes.
You and I like connect on that.
Yep.
Or a video DM, whatever works best for you. But yeah, like, let's talk, let's connect. If I can support you or encourage you in any way, I would love to be able to do that. My website's michaelabelle.co. And I need to get better at LinkedIn.
You really should.
I know.
This conversation that you're having has a place in LinkedIn. It really does. And there's such crossover in the personal development and professional development space. So we should have that talk.
Yeah.
It might be a whole nother workbook.
Knowing me, it probably will. Yes.
Yeah. And low-key tip for anybody, Michaela brought it up, but voice DMs and voice text messages are like the absolute jam. And if you want to get to know somebody, or you want to really understand what somebody's saying, do not type it in text, leave it in a voice memo. They're super powerful. It's actually the way that Christina and I communicate. It's the way that you and I communicate. And there's so much more like tone and tenor and emotion behind it. So I think we should be doing more of that. That's another tip that I'm glad you brought up.
Yeah, I think that's why Clubhouse started off really strong, is because, voice, and people can hear BS in voice.
Yeah.
But they can also hear and feel authenticity in voice. So I highly encourage you to utilize voice and video as much as humanly possible.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Michaela. And again, thank you so much for joining. We will close down by saying thank you to all who have tuned in. Those of you who tuned in live or are watching post, we go live every Thursday at 3:00. You can find all upcoming episodes, all past episodes at thoughttium.com/live. We will see you next week. We've got another great leader at the table, Mark Scala, the founder and creative director at Scalawag Productions. This is a unique, very, very exciting and explosive communications design agency that is doing some pretty incredible things with storytelling. And I cannot wait to dive into that with Mark next Thursday. So for all of you communications heads, all of you comms and engagements folks, you will definitely want to tune in to the discussion next week. Michaela, thank you for joining. Everybody else, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day, and we will see you all next week.